Another one I pulled.
Another one I
For
know.
those of you online, members of the public, if you are looking to speak during the public comment period, please let us know in the chat box and or raise your hand so that we can get you into our public speaking queue during that public comment period and allot the appropriate time. With that, I'll turn it over to our chair, Bill Brick.
No. Word red. Okay, well, we were supposed to start at 1 because we were gonna have some guests, and I think we still are having some guests. I don't know if it's fair to get into the district updates, except that I guess it's not. We go ahead and start, and if we said the director would like to interrupt you, they probably would not with that, would they?
I think based on how we've drafted the district and DM updates, we could probably go through a few pretty quickly.
Okay, well, there's no sense in sitting here for 10 minutes. We don't have to. So with you guys' permission of the districts, could we start out with, I guess Wayne's the first one. And then if the director comes in, you don't mind if we ask you to sit down, do you?
I get told to sit down and shut up all the time.
I know the feeling.
Right?
Okay, that was good. Would you like to sit down now?
Yeah. Absolutely. So mine will be pretty fast. I don't have a lot of updates from our last meeting. Other than what was kind of gone over this morning with the Yanawatt, the burn that we had. The team's been working diligently on the business plans and preparing those to present to you. And I did provide a quarterly update in each of your packets. And I'll make sure that I send these out each quarter just via email. And you're more than welcome to share them with your constituents or your different team members if you'd like. But this is just kind of what the Arizona Strip's been working on the last quarter. Get one? I think I put it in the file, but there you go. But does anybody have any questions or anything for me in the Arizona Strip? Up before I get told to shut up in color, right? Leon, that's your favorite one. Supervisor Horseman and Supervisor Fowler, we have a planned field trip I think next month, so
Looking forward to that.
we're gonna go out, we hit Mount Trumbull and look and see if we can see some of the different rec sites out there too. We go out to 2 weeks and look at the Grand Canyon.
If you're going to Mount Trumbull, take water, food. That was, I went my first trip out there and 4.5 hours later on a dirt road, I thought, what am I doing here?
It's like a massage chair.
Yeah, right. And I thought, well, why don't we just give this to Utah? And I should never have said that.
Yeah. We don't want to do that.
I do have one question,
Yes, sir.
and I don't want to take a lot of time on it, but we have some new national monuments. Has that affected BLM's management in that particular area to any great extent?
Currently, not yet, because we don't have interim guidance and we don't have a management plan. So the methodology that we're using on the Arizona Strip on the north side of the monument is using the previous resource management plan when it was the field office. And then we're overlaying the proclamation just to make sure that we don't have any conflicting direction with the proclamation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm hoping you're saying is that you'll still be in charge of the management, whatever the heck that is, you'll still be in charge of the management of that area.
On the BLM portion, yes.
You're right.
Yep, the Forest Service will manage the Forest Service lands and we'll manage the.
And your guidelines will be probably the national monument guide.
It'll be part of our National Conservation Land System. And it's a little more complex because we have, the Tribal Commission that we're still organizing and hope to have some meetings maybe this summer. We have a couple of, I think we're at nine out of the 13.
We're at 8.
Eight. of the different tribes. So once we get a couple of the key members, the bigger tribes on board, we'll see if we can have a meeting and maybe have some pressure so we can get all the tribes on board. But we're also working towards establishing the RAC that is identified in that proclamation that monument would have a resource advisory committee to stand alone. So
For that was my next question. That would be for that particular area
correct.
up there.
Correct.
So having said that, probably the issues that would come to us from BLM as a RAC member down here, do we still, are we gonna still be involved, or is all that gonna be switched over to the RAC? And I bet you don't know that. do you?
I don't know. I think we haven't figured out all those nuances. I'm sure that we'll still present stuff. Like maybe a sub-RAC member coming and presenting, but Jerry, did you have some input on that?
Well, I'm wondering, are we ever gonna see you again? But
Right? No, I'll still be here. Unfortunately, you'll still have to put up with me.
Yeah, so we're just at the really, really early stages of kind of starting to really just talk about starting up that RAC. You know, we're a ways out from developing the charter and exactly what their oversight will be. You know, most likely what that's gonna look like is something to the extent of this RAC won't necessarily have input on the management plan and stuff like that, but as far as providing updates and keeping all of you as far as a statewide basis updated on where we're at, kind of what's going on with that. Absolutely. Obviously, Wayne will be down here for all the regular district stuff.
could I suggest that you take over the Forest Service proposals on that rank up there? Apparently not.
Yeah, it'll be similar to this. It'll, function for both agencies, and what we talked about preliminarily and sharing workload is that the Forest Service is likely gonna take the initial lead on kind of working to start standing that RAC up, but it'll be in collaboration with the BLM.
I was just being facetious, as you well know, but I am curious, because I heard about the RAC, and I'm thinking, well, what does this mean? And what I'm gathering is you'll come back at the appropriate time when you get 8 Indian tribes together and get an agreement. Well, that ought to be in the next century or something.
Right,
like that.
absolutely.
So I don't expect to see you for a while.
Yeah, but we'll make sure the information
yeah.
flows freely too, so. Absolutely. Any other questions or?
I heard a comment. I heard a comment earlier in one of the presentations about identifying archaeological sites in the strip area. It's such a vast area. I just wanted to ask if that's ongoing or if you already have most all of them identified.
Oh, I don't know that we'll ever get all of them identified. With each project, we have to do different class level of surveys. And nationwide, because of all these integrated bench management projects and everything, nationwide, the supplier, the contract companies have, there's only a couple of them that are bidding on these, and the prices have, I'd say, at least doubled per acre cost. So it's always ongoing.
And across the state, we've only surveyed about 8% of BLM Arizona lands for cultural sites. It's just a lot, and it's very defensive and detailed.
Oh, gonna get the hook. I'm getting the hook. I can tell, I sense it. Saved by the bell. Here you go, boss.
Thank you, Wayne. RAC, oh my goodness, it is so awesome to see all of you. But even more awesome is you get to hear from our director today. This is actually a treat. Bill, I am not sure that we have ever had the director of the Bureau with us. You've been here, like me, a long time on this RAC. I do not recall we've ever had this opportunity before. It's my pleasure to introduce the director of the Bureau of Land Management, Tracy Stone Manning. I am going to be quiet because she has a lot of really good things to share with you. Tracy?
The only thing, Ray, excuse me if I interrupt you. She's not gonna take you away from us. 'Cause we've never seen anybody, but she's doing it.
That's a really fair question. And look at this in real time. I was out this morning visiting the Goldfield Recreation Area and the investments from bipartisan infrastructure law into that site and the remarkable story of Leon and his team and how they have transformed this little corner of our public lands for all to enjoy in a really intentional and thoughtful and appropriate way. And we're now thrilled that we have investments from the bipartisan infrastructure law to follow on that good work and get some trailheads in there for horses and some trails and have it be a place that responded to concerns from the community, right? The community came to us really concerned. And the team listened, right? And not only did they listen, they acted on what they heard. And now there's this terrific asset, soon to be open again for day use for everybody. And I love coming out into the field and hearing these stories and seeing this kind of work in action. When I first started to travel around the West in this job, I would say to people, as we're driving in the car and their bosses weren't around, and I would say, you can say anything. And also, why do you work here? And invariably, literally, the answer is the same everywhere. One of two things or both. People would say the people and the mission, right? I mean, our mission, our very complex mission draws a certain kind of people who are problem solvers and pragmatic, and that keeps them in the work. And I'm so grateful for it. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the newer things that we've been doing and touch on some things that are happening here in Arizona, and then just open it up to Q&A because that's the way more interesting part. Last week, we finalized the public lands rule, and I'm sure you all are saying, now tell me more about that and what exactly is that and why are you doing that? The nut of it is really pretty simple. You all have seen that we are dealing with a changing landscape out there, changing because of climate. We're in a 1,200-year drought here, changing because there's increased pressure on the ground. There are more and more people who want more and more uses from our public lands. So the idea of the public lands rule is to ensure that we are able to manage for the health of our lands and waters, so that we can continue to deliver on this really beautiful sustained yield mandate and mission that we have. That 30 and 40 and 50 and 100 years from now, there's still healthy range. There's still resources coming off of our public lands, and people are still out there enjoying them in a sustainable way. So the rule, we have got rules around our oil and gas program. We've got rules around grazing, around renewable energy. The one part of our mission, the one part of our mandate that comes from FLTMA, our founding and enabling legislation, that we don't really have a rule around is the conservation side of our mission. And now the times are sort of demanding that we ensure that conservation is on par with all these other uses so that we're able to continue all these other uses into the future. That's the real kind of the why behind it. There's a couple interesting tools in there that I want to quickly touch on. I know folks had been concerned about, what do you mean conservation leases that were in the draft? So good news for folks who are concerned about that, conservation leases are not in the final. What is in the final are the ability to do restoration leases and the ability to do mitigation leases. Let's start with mitigation. This country has a remarkable conservation success story from mitigation dollars that come from development that have been plowed into private ground to do good. It's an incredible success story. And now we'll be able to take in a very sort of consistent way mitigation dollars from projects on public lands and invest those dollars back into public lands, making them healthier for the future. Super exciting tool for folks, I think, going forward. The second and overlapping is the ability to for people to do restoration leases. Restoration leases, as the name implies, would be a lease for folks to do restoration on our public lands. They can either bring in their outside dollars or mitigation dollars to restore lands that need it. Couple key points here. We're not gonna put these leases on the ground where there's existing uses, where the people who have those existing uses say, no, thank you. I don't want a restoration lease here. I don't want to work with you. There's plenty of us for us to do, so we could just go somewhere else. Right, so the rule is pretty explicit that that restorations will not displace existing uses, and that we will drive restoration leases to places that want it. And to people on the ground, for example, some of our grazing permittees. The grazing permittee said, I don't want you here. We'll go somewhere else, right? But if a grazing permittee says, oh my gosh, for years and years and years, I was hoping you guys would get on this problem. I've got a cheatgrass problem. I was hoping you'd get on it. Then we'll work with them. So that's a really high level look at those two kind of important tools. And the last thing that the rule does, FLPMA tells us to, of course, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, thing that guides all of our work. The reason you guys are sitting here, tells us to prioritize the designation and management of areas of critical environmental concern. We've never had a consistent structure or a framework about what that means. What does prioritize mean? So that now is in the rule so that we are applying and using this tool consistently across the landscape. I think ACECs are impossibly cool. Congress was super smart that it gave us a tool that is very specific. Say a land manager identifies a specific thing in a specific place that needs specific management. Then we can create an area of critical environmental concern to manage for that thing. Doesn't mean that we're gonna manage for that thing at the exclusion of everything else. Just means we're gonna manage for that thing. And that thing could be cultural, it could be an incredible wall of petroglyphs, it could be a species, say a sage grouse. It could be, that's the wonderful thing about this tool that Congress has given us, that as land managers, we get to say, you know, this little corner of the planet needs us to pay attention to this thing. We designate an ACEC to manage for that thing. The lawyers back in DC would be so mortified by how I'm describing this. But at the crux of it, that's what the tool is, right? So we're really excited to have this tool out and about to give us the tools that we need to manage for the future. You all have seen the changes on the landscape. You've seen the amount of renewable energy proposals that are coming in the door here in Arizona. Ray and team are working on 39 utility scale solar projects. That's a lot, right? A third of them they're working on very specifically right now. A third they're kind of getting ready, and a third are in the really early stages. That's a lot of use on the landscape. But the president and the secretary have asked us to turn the corner to a clean energy economy, and places like Arizona can lead the way for the country. But we have to make sure we're doing it responsibly. We have to make sure that we're driving that development to the right places, and that we are managing for the other uses in that landscape. I often say that BLM does all the things, and it does, right? I mean, today we were talking about recreation, we're talking about renewable energy. Last time I was here, I was visiting shooting ranges and firing a rifle. I mean, we do all the things. And it's hard to balance all those things. And balancing them requires us to be really intentional and thoughtful about our work. And it requires the help of people like you. I've buried my lead. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's not easy to sit in a room for hours and hours and hours and do intentional work that a Resource Advisory Council asks you to do. So thank you for volunteering your service to this really beautiful place called Arizona in the country, and our Bureau, which has such a beautiful mission. So we really appreciate the efforts. Last, I'm going to touch on recreation. We were rediscovered. We, public lands, were rediscovered during the pandemic. And I don't think folks are going to go back. The numbers have been rising and rising and rising. We had we could document about over 5 million visitors on our public lands in Arizona a couple years ago. It's now over 6 million. That pretty soon begins to look like an exponential curve that we have to manage for. And so we have put together a 21st century blueprint for outdoor recreation to help guide how the Bureau does its work. I think Ray and his team are going to be bringing to you here in the coming months some ideas about how to fund that work. Because it turns out that America treats us like the recreation agency that we are. Americans keep coming, but the Congress hasn't quite caught up. And so our funding is not what it needs to be to serve the public in the way that the public and our public lands deserve. They'll catch up. It's going to take a while though. And in the meantime, there are tools that we can employ to help us catch up. Super excited about the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which is giving us some of those tools in the form of money and people. We'll be able to hire 40 new park rangers across the Bureau as a result of that investment. A reporter today said 40 in Arizona. I wish, but 40 additional ones is a start, right? We have 10, we're gonna have 10 park rangers here in Arizona, 2 of which are coming as a result of that funding. So that's, that's a significant percentage jump. Is 10 enough? No, but it's a good start. So those are some of the things that have been on my mind and that the team is working on, but I want to stop talking so that you guys can ask me questions. Unless, Ray, did I miss a topic I should hit on? All right, the floor is yours.
Well, I would like to take a moment, and I hope I do this right, and tell you what an honor it is to have you come and sit back and talk to us. At the same time, I want to let you know that we on the RAC take this job very seriously. These are all busy people, and our job is to help Ray and his team make good decisions, and we understand that, and we do the best that we possibly can. We're lucky that Ray's group, his whole team is magnificent, except for my range con. That's a joke. Anyway, boy, I'm gonna hear about that. Anyway, it is our job, and we want to do it, and we want to do it right. I only want to add one thing. When we leave here, we all go to our various industries and communities, and we sit there and have a cup of coffee in the morning, and somebody said, you know what the BLM is doing now? And we can turn around and say, that's not true.
Yeah.
We just spent 2 days up there, and that's not what they're doing at all. As a matter of fact, this is what's going on. Because if I have one complaint about the BLM, you're lousy, with the exception of you, of communicating all the things that take place. And yeah, I know, I'm on the way out now. But,
I agree.
in a way, that is serious, because this Amber was, as far as I'm concerned, the first one that came on board that really did the job to try to communicate, because she understands that. But we have not found a Smokey the Bear, and I don't know that we ever will. But you guys in this district with Ray and his team have done a magnificent job, and we try to support that. But we also go out and tell people in our industry what we do. So I wanted to mention that to you, because we're proud to be part of this, and we're proud to be part of the BLM.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that service. And I agree about telling our story. We're not great at it. And it's because we focus so much on the work and that we don't fully, sometimes we don't fully tell our story, right? And so that's in part my job, right? To go out and have the media come and say, look at this great job that folks have done. And I think we're getting more intentional about telling our story as well. And I'm really excited about, you mentioned Smokey the Bear and that other agency that happens to have a congressionally chartered philanthropic partner called the Forest Foundation, right? The Park Service has the Park Foundation that Congress set up. Congress finally got around to setting up a philanthropic partner for the BLM. They passed it in 2017 and Secretary Holland stood it up just in the last couple of years. So we now have the Foundation for America's Public Lands. And they have chosen sort of 3 buckets from which to begin to do their work. And one of them is awareness. Awareness not only about our public lands and how to be on our public lands, but awareness of the people who manage them for us and on behalf of the country. Because people don't know the BLM very well, and we want them to. So that when some of that misinformation happens, maybe on Capitol Hill, the public will say, now, hold on now, we love the BLM. So that's the long-term goal and play for the foundation. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, I should say hi to the people on the screen. Hi. I have my back to you, I'm sorry.
Director, thanks so much for, what a privilege. It's great to have you here. I am, my question is, oh, by the way, we're very well served in the Healy District by Scott Feldhausen and those groups. So Scott's a prince of a man.
See, Bill?
How it's done, yeah.
Oh, can I talk to you afterwards?
Yes.
Sell your ranch?
My question is this, with the final landscape rule being rolled out, and following that and reading some of the press articles, there seem to be 6 governors in the Southwest who are opposed to that and are threatening litigation because of that. And I wish they had been in this meeting because a lot of my questions were answered by your very brief presentation. But in the event that they do file, does the final rule roll forward unless there's an injunction and it's business as usual until there's some kind of you don't wait until there's a court decision,
Right.
assuming that they do sue?
Yeah, and without naming names, I thought, maybe you should read it before you sue. Like literally within hours, people are like, we're gonna sue. I was like, okay, but read it. We actually, there's a difference between the draft and the final, and that difference was informed by the public. We feel fairly good about how deeply tied this is not only to existing law, but to court decisions. The court over and over and over has said that conservation is a use. And so we feel that we'll be fine when it comes to our chances in court. And we're gonna plow ahead and begin to implement it. It's gonna, we're also not rushing into it. We want to make sure that we put together guidance for the field and with the field so that when we are implementing it, it's appropriate and it's going to work. This tool is going to be around for a really, really long time. So we don't have to go to, 0 to 100 in the next 30 days when it's finally finalized. Other questions?
I think we're all afraid of you.
I'm so scary.
I've already got in trouble, as you've already seen. Is there any other questions before we have the opportunity?
Team BLM, do you have any questions? Stop the director. Yeah,
Of course. I'm always fighting.
With this landscape mitigation rule, I commend you for putting it together, and we need a tool or a mechanism to determine what mitigation is necessary for a 6,000 acre solar field or an 8,000 acre solar field. What is the ecological take on that? What is the recreational take on that? And what is the mitigation that's going to be required? Mitigation on a recreation scale, mitigation on the ecological scale. And then if you go to a restoration area, a designated restoration area, what is that? How do you quantify the mitigation that's necessary? And then on your restoration area, how do you quantify the ecological lift that you're going to get? So I feel like there needs to be some type of ecological analysis and a mitigation measurement that you can put together so that you have an equal playing field? So if it's a 6,000 acre solar field or 4,000 acre solar field, you can quantify and qualify what that take is, and then how do you adequately mitigate it? And can you mitigate it on one of your restoration sites? And is there something, a tool that's spelled out so that so it's fair for the energy development?
Yeah.
To across the board. I mean, it's so vague. But is that in the works where we have like an ecological lift and also a mitigation analysis?
Yeah, really good question. And yes, it's in the works on how, what the mechanics behind the tools, like how are they going to work? And a team of very smart people is putting that together. In addition to the leasing portions of the rule, there's here's something important that I didn't mention. We're for a long time, I'm going to get to the answer, just it's going to be circuitous. For a long time, the grazing community has said, hey, how come we're the only ones who have to do land health standards? How come we're the only ones graded for our use? And we thought, yeah, that's a really good question. And so in order to manage in a time of change and for the future, we're now going to be applying land health standards to all of our programs. And that it will be accompanied hand in hand with the work that we already do on monitoring and assessments, right? And so that monitoring and assessments are going to help guide the restoration portions of the leasing, but also are the partners that we're going to be doing the restoration with. So say the Mule Deer Foundation comes to us and says, we want a restoration lease. Part of that lease will be us saying, how are you going to monitor the work and tell us the improvement you made? Show us your science, right? I think that, mitigation banking has happened very successfully on private ground. So there's models out there to just pick up and move on to public ground. And people much smarter than me are digging into those details, probably literally as we speak, to help get that guidance underway. And it'll be iterative too, right? We'll just get better and better as we go. Just like renewable energy rights of way, we've gotten better and better. In Nevada, we used to mow down all the vegetation and there was nothing for desert tortoise. Now we've gotten better and can leave 75 and 80% of it on the landscape and still have the solar fields work, right? So part of it will be learning as we go and taking instruction from, the great thing about restoration is there's a feedback loop. Nature tells us if we're doing it right or wrong. One point back to the landscape health assessments. So we're going to have overarching standards that will inform watershed condition assessments. We'll do watershed condition assessments with the help of our whiz-bang scientists in our National Operations Center. The field will then take and say, yep, this is right, this is wrong. The field will tweak it. And we'll have a watershed condition assessment about a given watershed. If the watershed is in good shape, then we won't need to do a land health assessment for whatever the project is, including a grazing permit renewal. So if the watershed's in good shape and your permit's up at the 10-year mark, we won't need to do a land health assessment for that specific allotment because the watershed's in good shape. So this is going to be terrific for concentrating our work where we need to concentrate it, right? In the corners of the landscape that need our help. And B, it's going to, I think, promote sort of more and more collaborative effort across the West where people have come together in watersheds to say, let's work together to make this place good. There's now even more of an incentive to do that. Should we ask anybody on the screen?
Director Stone Manning, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Steve Trussell, I'm with the Arizona Mining Association and Arizona Rock Products Association. And Director, I know you're well aware that Arizona is a mining state. We're the copper state. We have a copper dome on our state capitol, a miner on our seal, and a copper star on our flag. We're proud of that heritage. Federal lands are an important part of that for us. And I just was curious your thoughts, and to put that into perspective, we're the #1 producer of non-fuel minerals, and we're third in aggregate production, so that's construction aggregates. And we rely heavily on access to federal lands along with state and private. And I would love to hear your thoughts on how we responsible mining keeps that in balance from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm a Montanan. There is capital or copper on the our Capitol Dome as well. We are the treasure state. I really, when I was the director of DEQ, got a very first-hand look at the importance of not only the mining economy, but the the importance of the things that we dig out of the ground for the American public. So I think that I think that the BLM has done a pretty fine job for years of using the laws that we have to make sure that we're being as responsible as we can. As you know, the president asked us to, and the Interior Department led the way on a cross-governmental look at a critical minerals working group to figure out how the government can get better, smarter, faster at ensuring that we provide the critical minerals that this country needs to help us make the transition. I know it takes a long time, but we have gotten actually, we've got some really good examples of people using the tools at our disposal. We could have a much longer conversation about how Congress could get us better tools, but using the tools at our disposal to get these projects out the door. Really happy, for example, about the lithium mine that is moving ahead in Nevada, and a second lithium mine right on its heels that we expect will run through the environmental analysis process by the end of this year. Steve, I don't mean to sound flip, but I often say of the BLM, oh, it's a day that ends with a Y. Right, that's what we do. We do these things on a day that ends with a Y, which is to say we do these things every day. Our job is to balance all of these uses and to ensure that these uses are available for the future. And as I said to a room full of students a couple of weeks ago, the multiple use and sustained yield mandate is not for the faint of heart, but it's really important. It's really important to get right.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to hear from you today. I will, just say that we do have a great state director, and the local field offices have been great to work with. We get multiple reports on a regular basis from our mining companies that is where we, feel we're excelling in terms of working with those field offices. So thank you.
Yeah, good. And don't worry, we're not stealing Ray, even though I want to. I know I wouldn't be able to.
Got it roll.
We have to roll. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your service. Thank you.
Will you validate my card? Well, Scott.
Exciting.
I think you had 2 questions, right? You have a
Oh, we didn't get that. I'm
question,
sorry.
forget.
No, I didn't forget.
Dang it.
But it's not a tough one. My question is, as you do the vegetation management and control, especially mastication of the pinon and juniper trees, my question is this: do you? I don't see in the photos that you've got a chipping machine where you make it into mulch. I'm assuming you either burn it or you just leave it where it's at as a kind of a snag, which will naturally degrade. And if you do burn it, I know that the EPA and ADEQ give us a bad time, especially point source generators, about the regional haze, especially over the monuments. And I was wondering if you burn, do you have an exemption, or do you have to somehow or other disclose or estimate what your contributions are.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? So I guess to your first question about mastication devices. So there's different treatments, and I guess I'm lucky enough that I was a trainer on a Bobcat that ran a FECON head for a lot of years with the Forest Service. So that actually changes the fuel type from a tree to a mulch. So we don't have to go back in and chip it after we use the masticator. Another treatment is like a lop and scatter type treatment where you cut the trees or break them into smaller branches and just kind of scatter them around. And then we might follow up with a secondary treatment of a burn. Just depends on what the prescription is, what we want the fuel type to be out there. You know, it's really to break up that continuity, you know, to go from the 1 hour fuels or the 10-hour fuels from the 1,000-hour fuels, so you don't have a good ladder to get a big run. And then we want to change that fuel type into something that's a little more receptive to the environment, whether it be wildlife or grazing or any of that stuff. But what we don't want to do is introduce, you know, the invasives like cheatgrass and stuff. So we have a prescriptive method where we might go in with seeding first, then mastication to put a kind of a bed of mulch down, and then we'll allow the moisture so that the natives get a chance to kind of outcompete the pre-emergence like cheatgrass. So I don't know if that helps paint the picture, but we do have a prescription, and it really depends on what we want to achieve and where it is. You know, if it's a lot of encroachment of juniper, or if there's just like sagebrush that we want to transition into something else. So it's a really complex process, and we do have a lot of NEPA analysis and stuff that work for you. I think Patrice had a question.
No,
No,
you
good.
answered it,
Okay.
but thank you.
Anybody else? Hey, Scott, you're up, I think. Okay.
All right, thanks. I'm Scott Feldhausen, Gila District Manager out of Tucson. So again, we cover that eastern third of Arizona. A lot of the projects we talked about this morning on the IRA bill were within our district. Just wanted to run through basically the information we provided you last time we visited, which seems like it was just yesterday. And just a couple of updates. The mine plan for Copper Creek, we thought we'd have the EA out for that by now, but a few last minute changes from the company on how they want to approach the excavation. So still working through that. For what you just said in the landscape partnership, we just finalized the video story for that. Just got back to the installation this week. I was hoping we have approval to show it this week, but not quite yet. So maybe at the next meeting, we'll get that shared. But I think it's going to be a pretty cool story of that very unique partnership. You heard about all the Inflation Reduction Act and budget bipartisan infrastructure law projects this morning. As you saw, a little bit of a difference between what Wayne's district is doing up there, mostly focused on veg treatment, and what we're doing down in Gila, which is really leveraging partnerships to do a variety of work, from the water rights to the water conservation to endangered species work, in addition to the vegetation treatments. Not going to show you the pretty pictures from the landscape down at Los Angeles anymore. And Bill, if you don't quit poking me, you know, we can make that permit go away pretty easily, you know. Yeah, we got to learn from Paul over here. But on the integrated veg management one, I did want to provide a few updates on that, because a lot of the bill money for the fuel and ecosystem restoration is going towards that. And so I got our fuels guy to give me an update. So, you know, on average, you know, Gila District has been working on about 10,000 acres a year in total for both surveys, the treatments, and their activities. Where we can, particularly up north in Navajo and Apache County, where we're doing vegetation treatments, we do mulch that and send it to the cogen plant up at Snowflake, so we can do that. And then we, on our treatments down on Las Ciénegas and country, we produced about 375 tons of fuel wood that the local communities and Indian tribes came and got this past year. Which is a nice way to remove that from the landscape, so we don't have to do as much burning or mulching after the fact. And then kind of across the board. Get my phone to work here. Just got this information, so I know it's just printed out. With the money we've been receiving under the bill side, particularly on fuels and ER. Since 22, we have treated about 1,100 acres with mechanical treatments. About 6,000 acres with chemical, and that includes the chemical treatments we did on the 4 San Pedro NCA allotments just this year to bring those allotments back into alignment, what should be out there. We've treated about 800 acres with prescribed fire. We've done no seeding or erosion control. We've done cultural surveys, use this funding to get about 10,000 acres. And surveyed about 1,000 acres for invasive species and monitored pre-treatment, post-treatment about 17,000 acres. We have underway right now another 1,000 acres of mechanical, 8,000 acres of cultural surveys. And the funding we have yet to finish spending out that we have plans for will get us about another 9,500 acres of mechanical treatment, another 1,000 acres of chemical treatment, another 400 acres of seeding and erosion control, about 22,000 more acres of cultural surveys, and about 24,000 acres of pre and post treatment monitoring. So that's what the money we have in hand right now. So we are really upping our game. In total, that'll be about 60,000 acres of the Human District, in addition to the other work that we've been doing. And I think that's about it. Any questions for me?
Got me scared. I'm not
Good. Good. One last thing. So I was at the National Conference on Ecosystem Restoration last week. I was asked to speak on a panel on grassland restoration, mostly focused what we're doing down there on Las Ciénegas. And the whole focus of the conference, which the secretary also was there and did the close that on, was supposedly on collaborative restoration on landscapes. And what amazed me was there was some really good talks about really looking at the big picture, but there were so many places people are still head down looking at a specific issue and subject. And I don't know how many times I saw scientists get up and put up a presentation and draw polygons on the map of restoration needs on my district or our Sentinel landscape, and they're not talking to the people actually doing the work, which was really astounding, which really made me feel good about the work we're doing down there, especially through the Sentinel landscape and the Strength of Water MOU, where we're trying to build what we're doing on the work of others. And so it's trying to meet multiple needs and bring people skills and money to the table where we can and continue to leverage that partnership and really have a lot broader impact than we could do if we were just looking at our little piece of the puzzle. So that was good to see. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And this is the only guy in Santa Cruz County that when you go to lunch, someone says, I'm not gonna sit with him. The poor guy, we have had a lot of turnover in the last few years down there. Scott's been with us for a number of years now, and we've getting stuff done. But I wouldn't take that job for anything. You want to go talk to some interesting people, talk about the San Pedro River and water rights. And he's been in the middle of that. That's a tough job, and I'm gonna sell my ranch before long anyway, Scott, so you're not threatening me any. But anyway, we're lucky to keep these regional guys as long as we can. and it's hard because they're good. And they don't get birthday cakes and celebrations in the community often because they're always in the middle of some controversial issue. So. Okay, Scott, did I come out okay?
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, you dug
Okay,
yourself
thank you.
back in.
Yeah, there you go.
Colorado River District.
Good afternoon, I'm William May, I'm the district manager for the BLM Arizona Colorado River District. William Mack, the district manager for the BLM Arizona Colorado River District. That is Kingman, Lake Havasu, and Yuma, basically the whole western side of the state. I too don't have a whole lot of updates that other than what was covered this morning. You kind of got a picture of our workload as it relates to renewable energy from the presentation, as well as Jerry and his team talked about the business plans we're working on in our district. We're still pushing that forward, still managing boroughs. Bill, got to get those down to AML. Those gathers have been going well. Actually, still, we're still at 100% adoption rate for those. So that program is working out well. And that's about the big updates I have for our district, unless there's questions for me.
Do you have any questions? You know, your district is, I refer to it as the California district that happens to be located in Arizona. But the use of that area over there is going to be the fastest growing of all the BLM areas we have.
Yes.
Just because it's nice and it's close. And so you've got, you want to transfer down to Scott. Anyway, you guys are, I hope we can help you out some, because
Yes, sir.
that's a big opportunity, I guess is how you put it.
It is a very big opportunity. We, especially our Lake Havasu area, I mean, it's only 6 hours from LA, 4 hours from Southern California, 2 hours from Southern Nevada. We get the gauntlet of people, not even to mention all of our snowbirds that come for the winter. One of the things we are seeing, especially out in our long-term visitor areas, is our snowbirds are starting to stay longer. They're starting to extend the time that they are here in Arizona. So normally when we hit the peak time when they are normally leaving and going home, they're staying beyond those points now. So we still have a large crowd of dispersed recreation to manage. So yes, folks are flocking to use their public lands in Arizona for sure.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So where are we now? Is Leanne?
Up to you. We can, the public comment period doesn't start till 2:15. We can go into some of our DM and our DSD reports. And then take a break if you want to. I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I do not want to short anybody. But I do not like to leave at 5 o'clock and enjoy
Yeah.
5 million other people that are leaving at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I know Amber said she was going to, she didn't have anything new to update. So that's one of those DSDs that would, I know I have some updates from Art, Mark, and I know Jerry was gonna provide a few. So-
Why don't we, if it's okay with Jerry, is maybe we'll start out with his presentation, and if it goes beyond 2 o'clock, we just have to.
Or we also do have fire, and Mike Spieldy was gonna provide some outlook for fire.
Any of those people who would like to make the presentation now would help us. And the only caveat would be, we have to stick by the schedule in the public, so. Is there anybody volunteering, or should I just read a name?
Mike.
I'll go.
Mike will
You
go.
would like me to? Yeah. I don't want to jump in front of anybody.
Mike, your name was the one I was gonna read, so.
See, my concern is sometimes for the back. of the
Okay.
room.
Used to it.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce myself again. So I'm Mike Spildy. I'm the Deputy State Fire Management Officer for BLM Arizona. My supervisor, I think you've probably seen before, Kelly Castillo, is actually at a national fire leadership team meeting in Cody, Wyoming this week. And so I'm just going to cover for him. And he and I talked with help from Jared a little bit, just probably a little bit of information on our fire program here in Arizona and kind of where we're at going into this fire, what we call now a term of fire year. It's not really much of a fire season in Arizona anymore, but I just want to briefly touch on preparedness levels, and I'll probably maybe a little bit of education for some folks. And I'm sorry if you know this already, but we base kind of a lot of our fire response on preparedness levels. There's a national preparedness level that starts at PL1 and goes all the way up to preparedness level 5. And so really at PL1 nationally, when I talk about the whole United States, and they're made up in a bunch of different geographic areas, where of course in the Southwest geographic area here, which encompasses Arizona and New Mexico together. And so nationally, we're at a preparedness level 1, which means there's really not a lot of activity going on right now across the whole United States. Here within the Southwest geographic area, we're planning level 2, which is just a step up. Obviously, 5 is the highest. And so we're seeing a little bit of activity so far this year. What we had called the term probably light initial attack, light to moderate across our 4 districts that we do have. We base that, our response, I said, on preparedness levels, but we also base it on fuel loading that we have out there. And so, and you may know this a little bit, and working with our districts and our district managers know this, we do a lot of fuel sampling across the districts. We'll go out and measure the fuels that are currently out there. And we measured in tons per acre across the landscape. That coupled with taking additional fuel samples and determining the moisture of the fuels, that is all computed into what we have as a fire danger operating plan. And that really bases our response on how we respond to fires across the entire state. And so why do I bring that up is just it really determines our capabilities and if we need to bring in additional resources. Right now in Arizona for the BLM, we have, of course, our 4 districts, and you heard from 3 of the district managers here before myself. Within our 4 districts, we have 16 engines, fire engines based on various typing, from a type 6 that carries about 350 gallons of water all the way up to a type 3 and a type 4, about 700 gallons of water. Those engines are staffed anywhere from 3 to 7 people, depending on the engine typing. We have a tactical water tender up on the Arizona Strip that is staffed. It carries about 2,000 gallons of water that can go out and respond as well. Just a little bit of tidbit on that. I'm part of a national fire operations group for the BLM, and actually the Arizona Strip water tender is the most heavily used water tender that we have within the BLM, because they not only staff it during the fire season, but also during the winter months and to help on resource work, other projects across the BLM. So kudos to the Arizona Strip for doing that. We also have, which is really unique, and you wouldn't think of it in the BLM, we have 2 fire boats as well that are down in Yuma that we use to patrol the river and other areas in Martinez Lake and some other stuff that's going on there. Able to respond with the boats into the water. They're fully pump capable, shooting. There's kind of a water cannon on the front of them, and a very good resource, can pump hose lays, whatever we need to do there. We also have 2 helicopters that we are on contract for Arizona. Weaver Mountain Helitack that is based out of Wickenburg, just outside of Wickenburg, and then Moki Helitack, which is up in St. George. Those are 2 of the busiest helicopter modules that we have within the BLM for response and other resource work. Wayne had talked about a project up on the Arizona Strip, prescribed fire, just last week, where we utilized Moki Helitack, which is a type 3 helicopter to do aerial ignition. And so as mentioned, ping pong balls, that's a PSD, plastic fear dispensers. And so they're injected with glycol. They fall out of a machine from the helicopter. As soon as they hit the ground, within a certain amount of time, they do combust. And that's basically, we can critically or tactically fire prescribed fires to meet the resource objectives that we're trying to do. And so both of our helicopter modules are trained to do that. And so they do a lot of prescribed burning, aerial ignition around the state, and we help other states as well. A Couple other things, then we get prepared, and why I'm bringing this stuff up, because we're here to serve, obviously, the communities and the public, and we do a ton of training, we do a ton of reviews with our resources. We have a state preparedness review set to start the week of May 6th, and where we go around from a state review and just review all of our resources that are out there, engines, helicopters. I should have mentioned, we also have Aravipa, which is an interagency hotshot crew. They're based in Sierra Vista and work out of Fort Huachuca. And so that's a veterans-based hotshot crew that we try to hire, mostly veterans for that crew. They're a type 1 crew, considered some of the best elite firefighters that we have within the fire program, within the BLM. Within the state preparedness review, we go through a bunch of checklists just to make sure that we're ready for the fire year when it comes to qualifications and training, and all of our equipment is ready to go for the year. Because once we really start getting busy, which is right around the corner here, I think in Arizona last year, within our resources, between our engines and our hotshot crew and our helicopters and our chase trucks, our support vehicles, we drove well over 700,000 miles with our resources, and that's across the country. In Arizona, we obviously start our season earlier than a lot of the other states. Once we get through our season, we actually export our resources to other states to go help them out as well in a time of need. And in Arizona, if we have conditions and we're low on resources, we have the option of applying for severity, national and short-term severity, where we can bring other resources in to help us should the wildfire activity be critical levels. And that's at the PL4 and 5 level that I was briefly mentioning there. A couple of other things here. Incident management teams, and you've all probably seen or heard of them. We have 5 complex incident management teams within the Southwest area here. I'm actually an incident commander on one of those complex incident management teams. We also have 7 type 3 incident management teams, which are kind of that lower complexity that respond as well to some fires. And so with that, and a lot of questions always come up specific to kind of aviation needs in talking air tankers, if you will. So the Southwest area, we host 6 large air tankers, 2 very large air tankers, and 8 single engine air tankers. And so we have 13 bases across kind of Arizona and New Mexico where we house all of those air tankers. And then also, the seats carry about 750 gallons of retardant. Large air tankers are typically 3,000 to 4,000 gallons. And then VLATs, the very large air tankers that you've probably seen on the news and other reports and stuff, roughly 9,000 to 10,000 gallons of retardant on some of those. And so I'll just say the season kind of setting up this year with our fuel loading samples, the fuel moistures where we are. We're setting up for a fairly busy and active fire season, especially across the lower deserts. There's a lot of grass out there. You guys can probably attest to that you've seen that. That is the main carrier fire in our specific fire regime that we have. And so I fully suspect that we're going to have a pretty, I don't want to say significant, it's always hard to determine, but we're going to be busy on some level, whether it's in the lower deserts, helping our federal and other agency and state partners out that we've already been doing so far this year. The state of Arizona has had a fair amount of activity just over this last weekend that we responded to and helped them with a couple of incidents. And we have great relationships with our federal and state partners, and fire does not know boundaries, as we all know that. And so we got to be ready to respond and work with our cooperators, and we do an excellent job of that here in Arizona. So I think that's probably about all I have. Any questions or anything, I'll happy to entertain that, but just I wanted to give you guys just a little bit of update of our BLM Arizona fire program and kind of what we're looking like for this year. So, question? Yeah.
Sure. So I was just wondering, one of the other benefits of trails that I see is that it provides better access for firefighters in a wildfire event situation. So kind of with some of the solar energy projects that are being planned, I was thinking about, okay, we need a break for recreation and possibly a trail, but now what I'm thinking is from the firefighting aspect of it, is there like a certain, you were saying the areas need to be fenced in for safety, but is there kind of a certain size that might be too large, or are you also seeing opportunities for kind of breaks within some of those solar sites for firefighters to be able to more quickly respond and maybe, be able to better break the fire instead of
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid question for sure, and honestly, we go where the fire is and we try to, if there's an actual fuel break or if there's some sort of infrastructure there, we base a lot of our fire response on WUI, which is the Wildland Urban Interface, as most folks are probably aware of that. And we do a lot of our fuels treatments associated with those. And if there's solar sites or other infrastructure, we're already looking at that. And that's one of the first things that our incident commanders do when they roll up on scene, such as if there is something like that, is access. How can we get there? Is there already a fuel break that is already planned there by way of putting in that infrastructure? Is there something that we can utilize? Instead of just going out there and trying to dig line and they're using dozers or something along those lines, trying to be more strategic where some of that stuff is when we respond to it.
So we'd love to see some proactiveness
Yep.
then on the side of
Yep.
the solar developers too, to maybe be more aware of this type of access for folks. The other question I had is, kind of regarding firefighter safety. So is there anything, like, what else can we do to make sure that firefighters are safe when they're out there? So is there more technology relating to like GPS or anything like that? I was just wondering your thoughts.
It's a great question. So in Arizona, I will say that we in several years ago, and Jared and others can attest to this, that we've implemented a little bit of a tracking system within the BLM now, and it's called location-based services. We have tracking devices on all of our assets now, and meaning our engines, our helicopter modules, Aerovipe, our hot shot crews. So could actually pull up on my phone right now. There's an app associated with it, and I can see where all of our resources are located. And that's really just for situational awareness. I'm typically the state duty officer and moving resources around to areas where there's higher fire danger, higher fire activity. That just gives me a bigger picture. I think the next step of that is potentially, and we're not there yet in the BLM, and I know other federal agencies are looking at it, is individual firefighter tracking and to be able to track folks that are actually out on the fire line. There's a lot that goes into that, in my opinion, and being an incident commander and trying to track that. And if who's going to be in charge of that on an incident and communicating with those folks that are out there, the technology is there. I think it's just partly trying to figure out how to implement that strategy to make sure it's one, safe for the folks that are out there. The communication is there. And you guys know in some of these rural areas, communications can be very difficult, whether it's cellular, satellite, what have you. It's tough to do. So we're just focusing on kind of our rolling stock is what we call it now, and locating everything with location-based services. But it's a great question. Others? All right. Oh, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. We're kind of got 5 minutes here to do nothing. So,
We can go into another one. 15 minutes.
I think it's 2:15.
It's 2:15 is a public comment.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course I knew that. Yeah, why don't we go into another one?
Art, do you want to try to work
Sure,
on
mine
time here?
should be pretty quick.
Okay. We had some text updates that I made to did you have some photo updates? I can't.
No,
No.
did you update the?
Yeah, I
okay.
updated the text.
So, not a whole lot of updates from the last time I presented on the 4 specific projects. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? So not a lot of updates, and I think you were provided the information on those 4 projects I updated last time, but I did want to make this group aware of a couple things going on with engineering as a whole and BLM and funding wise. So for fiscal year 24, we took cuts of about 20, and we just got our annual work plan. You heard that earlier. So we're working on it now, getting the program leads to do the directives. But our engineering program in the facility maintenance and deferred maintenance areas received 25% cuts or 24% cuts. BLM wide, I think they're around 30 and 40. We just ended up in those areas. It just depended on the state. So that significantly impacts our ability to provide facility maintenance to all these new facilities we're building, right? And so that ties back into our recreation talks earlier about fees and everything else. So those are going to be become more critically important moving into the future. For FY25, we're not sure yet if we're going to get any of that money back. We're hoping we get at least some of it back. I think we did hear word that we were going to get some of our deferred maintenance back, maybe a couple $100,000 by the end of the year. But right now, it was a significant impact to our budget. Means we also have to look at personnel, right, as well. So
So just some of the things I just wanted to make you aware of moving into the future and how important it is. You know, when it comes to recreation, our new shooting sports site facilities, all these new facilities that we want to upgrade. And who's going to maintain them, right? We don't have the funds, you know, moving into the future to maintain all of them, and it's a struggle. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that. The other thing is Great American Outdoors Act. I'm sure everybody remembers that, right? Pre-Bill IRA, which is the big focus right now. So that's coming to an end in FY27. So we were able to submit a couple projects, one for 26 and 27. We're hearing that most likely they won't get funded. We did have one, they called it a pop-up project, which was a lot lower dollar threshold. They said our project, and that one's slated for FY26, should get funded, but it's only around $300,000 or $400,000. So just wanted to make this group aware of the struggles of, you know, maintaining our facilities. I think Tracy, our director, she kind of mentioned that, you know, our bureau really doesn't get the attention when it comes to recreation. So hopefully moving into the future, that changes. So that's all I really have at this point. Any questions?
Thank you. Well, one, thank you for all the information. One, was that cut? So you said 25% or 30%?
24% in each of those areas are programs. Yeah.
So was that do you know if that was across the board with the western states? Versus Arizona, do you know?
That was just Arizona. So each state, it varies a little bit. I think across the board in deferred maintenance, there was 25 average percent cuts. And I think in the facility maintenance was like 35 or 40%, somewhere in that area. So, and then it varied as they pushed the money down to us. It kind of changes depending on how, you know, they want to parse out the money and our amount of projects and things like that. They look at the size of the state, personnel, amounts of facilities, things like that.
And that did impact the personnel. Yeah.
Well, we're not sure yet. We're hoping it doesn't because we want to, you know, we need more personnel. That's one of the things here. We talked about park rangers, but it's just not park rangers, maintenance folks. We really need to hire a lot more maintenance folks now, laborers. Prices for everything have gone up. And so when we take cuts, we have to really start, okay, we're planning on hiring these folks, how we're going to do it. So again, it goes back to those recreation fees and how important they are moving forward. You know, if that's a good stopgap measure, while maybe in future years, the department is able to secure more funding for BLM in the recreational area, it would be nice, but.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the cuts. And well, I guess so the Inflation Reduction Act in the bill will obviously not help cover the gaps with the budget.
No, not well.
Right.
So those are mostly slated towards newer projects,
Okay.
you know, especially Bill, a lot of the fuel stuff. IRA a little more does help, but everything's very specific. And we can't hire folks. There's a lot more restrictions with Bill IRA, a lot more auditing, a lot more oversight. I think they took that from GOA where and I think previous, what was the one? ARA, if you remember ARA back in Obama, 2009, American, I can't remember, but there was a lot of lessons learned from that. So the auditing and oversight becomes a lot more critical and, you know, so there's a lot more scrutiny.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear about the cuts, but thank you for telling us about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Somewhat confusing. The BLM is going to present to us somewhere in the future a list of fees that they'd like to increase in the facilities that they have, and in their mind for a good reason, probably are. Now you just got finished telling me you're going to build some more, but you don't have the money, or do you have the money? Or should we say, don't build until we give you a fee increase? Or are you going to put enough money in your project that there's a fee increase already in it? I don't know where you're going with all that.
Right. It's a good question, Bill. So what we're talking about is funding for, you know, future just normal facility maintenance. And I think Jerry brought it up, those recreation business plans, they talk about that part of it. We've never done those before, or if we did do them before, it was a long time ago in the past. So now putting those together, it takes into account all the labor needed, the recreational fees as a portion of it, So those are things that we can look at the future. So that kind of all recruits it from those recreation funds, right? A lot of it. But a lot of times they look at our funds, our facility maintenance for their labor, for the folks that do that work. And so that's the struggle. And also us, we provide funding for maybe smaller projects that have to do like, hey, you know, a bathroom's broke. I need to go fix a toilet, or I need to go rehab something at this facility that we built. So those are the sort of things that we need to take into account as we put these together. So that's what it becomes a challenge when they reduce those funds. So hopefully it's temporary. Hopefully it was this year's cycle. You know, it's a election year, so we'll see what happens coming up. So, yeah.
Are you talking about building the 4 additional like rec shooting sites that we were talking about earlier? Or are you just in general, just other facilities that we're building? Because the rec fees, I just want to be clear, the rec fees that we will, you know, hopefully get out after the business plans are done and it's approved and we implement them, those go to the rec sites. So right now, just to put it in perspective, the appropriated dollars that we get, because we don't have fees in a lot of our sites, we use the appropriated dollars to do the maintenance, whether it's a vault toilet or if it's, you know, improvements at a campground or the maintenance of the rec shooting sites. You know, we're working with the appropriated dollars that we get right now. So with the rec fees, those will offset because those go straight back. If you remember, those go straight back into that site. So that can pay for the maintenance, the staffing, improvements, and those, what we call MLR dollars, appropriated dollars. Those can be used for other types of infrastructure type projects, whether it be road work or, you know, other sites that don't have rec fees or just improvements in general. So that's the link to the rec fees that we're talking about. Any reduction, especially in maintenance, hurts us because we've never been fully funded for what we need to maintain. Again, those are roads, maintenance, all of our, and when we talk facilities, we're not talking about our office building. We're talking about our kiosks and
Could be anything, roads,
yeah,
buildings, recreation facilities, whatever type of facility that is out there, not in.
campgrounds,
Campgrounds.
toilets, everything. Yeah.
Mhm.
What else? I mean, there's a lot more to talk about those sites that we use maintenance dollars on.
You're helping me get my head around this. Because what I'm thinking is going to be talking about adding funding to an area that we haven't given any funding to for 20 years. And then we're also talking about building facilities. That are maybe some of them similar to this. And we're not going to talk about the funding of those facilities because we haven't built it yet. But where I was leading to this is, okay, where I was leading with this is that one of the advantages, and I'm not taking sides until I see the proposal, but if we fund those that haven't been funded for 20 years, does that leave us some funding to go fund the new sites that we may not have to fund because we've brought on additional funds? So you get out of that one.
How I get to that one.
Good question, Sharon.
The rec shooting stuff's annoying.
Yeah, so sort of, but not really, but it also depends. Right, so it's like the BLM answer, it depends. So when we propose new sites, we are looking at those in the plans and that they are being included in the plans. We cannot implement a fee for a site that we haven't built until we build it, but we can get the pre-approval to do the fee for when we do build the site, which is why we're incorporating them now. But part of the strategy for the way that we're approaching some of the plans, most of our plans, I think. So like you saw, they're either, some of them like the Phoenix District shooting sites ones are for the whole district, all of the shooting sites together. Or they're for a field office wide, all of those sites, rather than a plan for each specific site. And that gives us a little bit more flexibility on exactly where and how we can use some of those funds. So if there is extra money that's collected like within the field office and that's an approved site, then we might be able to use that funding to help build and then maintain that site ultimately when we can charge the fee at that site also. Or if we were able to get project funding through, engineering or through the REC program or through IRA or through bill or any other means that Congress might approve in the future to be able to build and develop a site, then we'll already have the fee approved to provide for the ongoing maintenance of that site, whether that's the engineering staff or the ports account folks that do the maintenance or the law enforcement people or park rangers or whatever. So we are trying to think long-term about that with the business plans. But the answer is not exactly clear cut on whether we can use those funds to actually build the site or just once it is built. It kind of depends on the type of site and the way that the plan itself is structured.
Boy, did you clear that up.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
I think one of the big advantages that we have is that with your fees, the way I'm interpreting it, and if you're paying for it now, and now you've got fees coming in, then these sites, to my mind, have access to money they wouldn't have had if there was no fees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Push that,
Absolutely.
because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
From my standpoint, because you haven't gone in for 20 years. I think that's one nicest compliment you could do for yourself. Well, what I'm concerned about is, well, we've done that, now we're gonna start every year. But you're not saying, you're taking care of your problems, and there's gonna be possibly some money left over for possibly maintaining those, and you may not have to come in for another 20 years. Wipe that smile off. So, okay, I asked you the question and I answered.
No, we're trying to be really strategic about it and also having those types of things in place already, I think helps our projects be a little more competitive sometimes to get those project dollars. So like in the case of the Table Mesa recreation area up north of Phoenix that has some of those future shooting sites as part of that overall site design. We've already received, I think, what, $1.5 million, something like that, or close to $2 million maybe, between MLR funding and IRA and bill. Not IRA, excuse me, bill funding and MLR funding for the development of that site. And so that's exactly why we're building that into the business plan so that when that site's up and running, we'll be able to provide the maintenance.
That makes sense.
The challenging thing about the cuts to the deferred maintenance, that's our 5-year plan. Those are our capital improvements. Those are our big projects. So those cuts hurt. Especially right now when we go out for, bids on these projects and they're coming back. Oh, gosh, at least double, if not more, of our independent government estimates, our IGs. And so when we make those estimates, and that's what we're asking for, that's what we're planning for, and then the bids are coming back so high. It's just, it's a little, makes it a little bit challenging. I'll say that just to get some of the work done.
Yeah, that actually was reflected on the updates that I gave in the information I provided to Dolores. Like one of the projects there, I think it was Fairbanks. Bids came in way high and we're having to de-scope. That's been pretty common, especially with our GOA projects. The bids are coming in so high, we're having to either de-scope or split them up, figure out different ways to get these projects funded and done. So just a lot of challenges on that side of the house. So again, oh, sorry. I can get that. But anyways, any other questions?
One last thing. I was just gonna say, that it's nice when there's flexibility built in. So like with the BLM shooting sites, for example,
Yeah, I just like to see that flexibility built in. If somebody's shooting in those areas and you all have challenges outside of those areas, that maybe there is some kind of flexibility built in for staff to be able to accommodate where they're having some of those larger challenges. I've heard of plans before that have been too prescriptive, so definitely nice to think about it in a way to make sure that the staff who are on the ground who know the areas are able to be flexible with that funds where they're able to.
Yeah,
To address it.
100% agree. We're not being short-sighted about this. We're trying to be as strategic as we can, and still meet the needs to get something approved, right? We can't be so general that, that we're not fitting within the rules that we have. But absolutely, we're looking at doing that. I mean, we've learned, especially when we didn't have a RAC for quite a while, you know, so we've learned lessons there, I think, and trying to apply those, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but I think that we have a really good plan going forward on this.
All right, thank you.
We've got a few minutes. It's 2:13 according to our clocks here, Bill. We can just run through the rules of order for public comment period that's supposed to commence at 2:15, if you'd like. See if anybody has volunteered to speak.
I think it would be appropriate to run through that because whether there's anybody here this time now, but it's the same thing tomorrow.
Yes.
And I would be surprised. And I think everybody's familiar with it, but if you don't mind, Dolores,
Okay.
you know, what obligation are to respond.
So we've got the public comment period starting at 2:15. We've put everybody that's online in the visual here on the screen. And we currently do not have any public in person here. So we'd be looking at anybody online interested in doing a public comment should identify themselves now so that we can allot the time. There's 30 minutes dedicated to this public comment period, and the chair will determine how much time based on how many people would like to comment. If you do not want to comment now, we can continue with our schedule, and you can always submit a comment in writing to myself at dagarcia@blm.gov, and that information is in the chat. I do see we have one hand up. Let me give it just one more minute or just a few more seconds here. And I'll turn it over to the chair. Looks like we have one person at this time.
Thank you, Dolores. They're on the screen.
Yes.
So it would be appropriate to, first of all, welcome you and thank you for taking your time to comment to us. We're very interested in what everybody has to say. We may not be in a position to answer your question, but we are in a position to listen to what you have to say about any things that we're doing. So with that in mind, I don't have the name of that person, but if you're online, ready to say, maybe you introduce yourself and we'd like to hear what you had to say.
They are online as Patience O'Dowd. Patience, if you'd like to please come off mute.
So there's my dogs. Sorry. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I don't know all of you and this chance to speak. I'm sorry about my dog. Somebody just drove up. So I just want to, one of the folks who spoke earlier mentioned, the scientists were kind of taking a narrow view of things, or like a one voter issue type of thing. And I just want to start out with this. I always think that yes, I'm a wild horse advocate. I'm the president of Wild Horse Observers Association, which was formed in 2004. And as a 501c3, we were formed before that. But my point being is that I've worked well with the Forest Service. I've been on their team for probably 4 years now and worked with the ranchers there. Very good friends with them. So the thing I think is that even though lines seem to be drawn off, and I don't think they're necessary, and then for that reason, I wrote the WOA National Plan, where ranchers would be paid for darting PZP. And I wrote it because of the IPCC report, and I wrote it for the Forest Service. And so 2 teams of ranchers went ahead and got trained to dart PZP because they're the people that are out there that know the area, know the animals out there, and can certainly are usually good shots, etc. But I just want to say that, we are in a 6th mass extinction. We do have to make sure that we do not lose all of our biodiversity. And Arizona Fish and Game is one of the few that has a good amount of guzzlers out there. And you can see that online. So I much appreciate that. But I just want to say on the global view, we have, according to USDA FAO, we have 1.5 billion cattle. According to scientists in Europe, or Ludovic Orlando, PhD, who's written extensively on wild horses and domestic horses, habituated horses, whatever you want to call them, that there's 60 million horses worldwide, and that would include in people's corrals. So wild horses is very small. And so when you look at the relative weights of a cow, which AG Tech says is 1150, and that's in averaging mature and mature, because mature is average of 1400. When you look at the average weight of a cow and the average weight of a human, which the WHO says is 130, about 130, because between men and women, and that's worldwide. Of course, we in the United States weigh much more, but worldwide is what I'm looking at, not that narrow view, is that basically cattle outweigh humans by 8.8 times on our globe. And so when we're thinking about biodiversity, that's what we have to look at. And when I've done these calculations just for a certain state, say New Mexico, it looks the same because we have 1.4 million cattle here usually, and about 2 million people. Cows weigh well overweigh us. So I just want us to keep that in mind. It's not to say I think that we're ever planning to get rid of cows, but I just want to keep that in mind because I think that making sure our watershed, I'm with you on that, making sure our watersheds are healthy and making sure we have water on our for all of our wildlife. And so I consider myself a conservationist. I have a BS, and I'm not a one issue person, but I do focus on these things because most people don't. So therefore, I might as well let everybody else do the other stuff, the politics and the party hate between corporate parties. So I'm not involved in any of that. And so I just want to end by saying I would like my name and my email, which you have added to all of your HMA notification lists. And I know that, we've got donkeys and horses there. And we've lost one of these horse HMAs in 2019. And I'm sure I've gone over my 2 minutes. Did I have 2 minutes?
You have.
Yes.
Okay. There's only one other person, so it would be time for you to wrap up. And I think she's from the same organization you are.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm from WO, and I also am the science writer for OWHO. So I'm representing WO here today, but also I am the science writer there. And I will gladly wrap up, and I really thank you for not interrupting me. I appreciate your graciousness, and I do looking forward to working with all of you. And I have been to Arizona a lot. I have property in Arizona, in Safford, Arizona. And so, and I think that our wildlife, like our wolves, are going through both states. And I think having wild horses out there for a wolf to take down, I think that's important because I know that people don't want the cattle hit by wolves and they don't want the deer and the elk hit by wolves. So I'm sure that wolves are really should be married, and I know they are in the alpine forest. So on that note, thank you so much, and please do add me to each HMA notification. All right.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments and your time.
Thank you so much.
And we have another person.
We do have Christina Anderson.
Christina, can you hear me? Christina?
I'm muted. I can hear you.
Okay, now's your time.
Thank
Would you
you.
like to go ahead and
And introduce yourself and your organization.
I am Christina Anderson. Live here in Oregon, and I'm with Oregon Wild Horse Organization, or OWHO. And we have concerns that livestock grazing will be allowed to be considered conservation. And we sincerely hope that this council will recommend that BLM do not do that, given the negative impacts of these ruminants. It has been well documented and studied how hard these animals are on the landscape when they're in such mass quantity. And we have seen the degradation that has gone on in areas with allotments that do not have wild horses, which seem to get blamed for it a lot. I would like to see more independent studies and data on the removal of the wild horses and what improvements this is on the landscape when the same amount of cattle is allowed to continue to graze there. I'd also would like to see more on-range fertility control and more of the budgeted money into restoration of the land. Because right now, 3/4 of the budget is going for long and short-term holding and gathers, which is not good for taxpayers, and it's not good for the horses. And it just seems like this has been the way for so long, but it's not working. And I don't want to see America lose their wild horses. And I don't want to see, as many cattle out there as we have now, because we do have the documentation of what cattle can do to climate issues. So that is my spew, and I'm trying to keep it under the 2 minutes. I thank you for listening to me and taking my message, and for having this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. We appreciate your comments and your time. Is there anybody else that is wanting to speak to the public? Dolores?
At this time, we have no one else identified that wants to speak.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, we still have it open for about,
5 more minutes.
yeah. So why don't we go, let's see. Can't take a break because we have 5 more minutes. Why don't we go ahead and start our next presentation? If anybody comes online, we're gonna have to stop that presentation, Dolores,
Okay.
and let them speak. So is that okay with all of you?
2:45.
45?
Yeah.
But we have more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on back to the division and our program update, and I don't know where we are on that. Art, did yours, and who else is back?
We've got Mark and Jerry.
Jerry and Mark.
Art?
Jerry and Mark are left. Art's done, yeah, we have Jerry and Mark are all we have left.
Jerry. You understand that I may have to stop you, please. Please.
All right, I don't probably have much of an update, just like the other folks, and heard a lot from my group this morning on kind of what we're up to still with, with recreation and restoration, which are probably the 2 biggest pieces of our portfolio right now. As far as priorities, I mean, obviously there's a ton of other things that are still going on that is pertinent from the last update that I provided. I will share that we just recently finished up a wild burrow gather at Lake Pleasant for that HMA, where we removed 400 burrows from that HMA. And we've also adopted out 100 into private placement just last week. And so we continue to see 100% success in the removal of burrows from the public lands and being able to place them into private care. We're in the process of conducting the EA to establish the appropriate management level for that HMA and what future management actions might look like. So that'll be an ongoing process. And then to build on some of the good news that Art shared earlier regarding the engineering budgets. We're seeing similar reductions in pretty much every aspect of the various kind of recreation related appropriated funds. That would be wilderness, national conservation lands, and recreation itself. Although the percentages are smaller, they still total about $750,000 in reductions specifically to BLM Arizona for fiscal year 24. So when you think about the cost of projects or maintenance or park rangers, even though that's maybe not the hugest number, it's definitely still significant to our program, and we're already facing this critical shortage of resources just to meet the needs. When you really think that we've seen increases of about 38% in use just in the last 1 to 2 years, and that continues to increase. Any things like this just really kind of continue to emphasize how important the completion of these business plans and really thinking long-term about how these sites can be operated and the resources necessary to do that and provide for, the excellent visitor experiences. Are there any questions about anything in the resources division? That might be easier than trying to think of maybe what I haven't told you about yet.
My question is specific to funding. With the recreation plans, I understand that it's like largely users' fees that are going to be funding these sites, but I'm quite surprised we haven't talked about like the NRA. It seems like they would be funding the shooting sites, or the tax on ammo would be funding that. And then also this other funding mechanism is the special use permits, commercial, Red Bull, the motorcycle races, like what is those fees and how are those fees used, or are they not part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jill. So to go to the last part first, SRPs. So we haven't really been talking about SRPs when we're talking about, special recreation permits. We haven't been talking about those as part of the business plans because really they're separate. They're under a separate authority. And so special recreation permits actually aren't included in the business plans. Those are just for user fees or what, for the amenity fee sites. And so special recreation permits we deal with separately. They don't require a business plan because the fees are already set by the BLM director on a recurring basis. And so we follow those regulations. And so those fees do go to support both recreation staff and potentially the resources out there. It kind of depends on the type of special recreation permit, whether it's, an individual, which some of our sites do have or have had in the past, or a commercial or competitive type of fee. So that is another piece that goes into it. I don't have numbers off the top of my head. I don't know if you have ballpark numbers, Miley, that you can share.
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
So it's one of the many pieces. And I'll just mention that, along the lines of kind of what I talked about as far as the cuts and then maybe SRPs. And Scott had mentioned it earlier, and I know we're already planning to do this, but before we actually do the presentations, or kind of at the beginning of when we do the presentations for the BLM business plans at the next two meetings, we're planning to kind of do maybe during the informational portion, like an overview of maybe the last 5 years. This is what funding has looked like across the various sectors of the recreation program within BLM Arizona. So that'll cover kind of our different programs that are recreation or recreation adjacent that play into that. And special recreation permits would definitely be one of those additional pieces that kind of fit in. So at the next meeting, we'll plan to include that in that overview. So we can probably talk about that in some more detail at that time. And then going to the earlier part of your question, if you're talking about like the NRA or the tax that's on ammo sales. So the tax on the ammo sales is called the Pittman-Robertson fund that actually goes to state wildlife agencies for allocation. We, have talked with Arizona Game and Fish. It just kind of depends. A lot of that gets handed out through grants. Sometimes as a federal agency, we can't get those. Sometimes we can. Those are opportunities that we're definitely looking for, in addition to charging fees for the users of those sites. Is figuring out what other opportunities are out there for us to be able to bring fees in that don't have to, or might decrease that impact to the user, right? Or be able to lower those fees. And so that's something that I know Miley and myself have both been working with the Phoenix district specific to the shooting sites to identify those, and their new outdoor recreation planner that Miley mentioned earlier that we brought on using IRA funds. He's actually going to be pursuing those opportunities as well. And so that's something that's also definitely on our radar. As far as support directly from the NRA itself, that's a little bit different. I mean, there certainly are certain types of opportunities or that would fall maybe underneath our donations policy and things like that. But like if you go out to North Phoenix and you see Arizona Game and Fish's, Ben Avery Range, they have, Berger Bullets as a sponsor of their site. The BLM can't really do that. We can do certain limited types of things where they could do like a donation and build, shade structure or something like that at a site, and I can have a small sign, but we can't really do like sponsorship for the federal government. And so our regulations are a little bit different in that regard, unfortunately, or fortunately, it makes it a little bit more complex, especially when we have kind of conflicts of interest or potential always for appearances of that and kind of competing things. So it gets really murky once we have to kind of get into the ethics rules. Did I get every piece of that?
I'm sorry, Jerry, you did mention the donations policy, and I was just thinking of our meeting at PDO that we had a few weeks ago where we went up and we're actually brainstorming. Ray, Jerry, Mark and we all went up there and with the leadership team at the Phoenix district office, and we're just throwing out ideas of, how we can fund these sites, how we can, improve them going into the future. And the donations policy and the update to our BLM donations policy was a huge part of that. That's big for us when we get the policy to actually do some of these things, because the federal government, we're highly driven by policies. So that's where it gets, where Jerry was saying it's a little bit murky. Things that may just seem really simple and very obvious. We have different rules, so we have to make sure that everything we do is within those rules, regulations. But I think that we are getting tools that will help us more. And some of the creativity that came from the team out there was just amazing in different, and some of more partnerships and just as a whole in BLM Arizona, we are getting better at the cost recovery agreements we put in place for projects, SRPs when we do an event, although that's very specific to that activity that you're permitting. So it's not like you can get that, the SRP and have a cost recovery from that and just spend it on anything. Again, it's very, very limited to what you can do with it, but it's a way to leverage all of those sources to, again, open up those appropriated funds that we've typically just used. And so anywhere where we can offset appropriations, that just makes it better for us, and more that we can do with those appropriated dollars in other projects where we don't have those opportunities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're definitely kind of looking at it as an all of the above, and just the business plan is just kind of one piece of it. The other thing that I'll just add on to what Jared said about, thinking about how we can, get donations or fund the shooting sites. It's just really to kind of go back and to the beginning, kind of reemphasize that the operation of developed shooting sites by BLM is kind of a novel thing for us, for our agency, that didn't exist anywhere within BLM at all. We had no policy on how to do it. We built the sites here in Phoenix, and so we kind of used to always refer to them as pilot sites, but we stopped doing that because they're obviously here and they're not going anywhere. And so a lot of that has driven the stuff that, like Jared mentioned, so that donation policies and honestly like hazardous materials standards policies and all kinds of things like that the agency just either didn't have a need for or didn't realize that we had such a critical need for. And it kind of elevated the priority of working with our folks here on the ground that have been super creative, like Jara said, who have continued to kind of evolve and improve the operation of those sites and the efficiency at which they operate. Even since they've been opened, we've seen presentations on how they've evolved the target designs and things like that to actually make those less costly dramatically. So, and so their staff out there is doing a really great job on trying to figure out how do they maximize their ability to operate the sites on a cost efficient basis. Partially because that's just responsible operation, for what we're doing on behalf of the public, but also because we know that does impact the users when we're looking at having to charge fees to be able to pay, for those services.
I have a question that I'm a little confused about. I read the Forest Service proposals and there's lots of grants involved in this. It looks like several $100,000 in grants. I spent 5 years on the Game and Fish Commission. We had a group of people that went out and solicited funding, more or less. They would go to the Mule Deer Association and say, we need some help getting water over into these areas over here. Can we do that? And I'm not saying this is bad, but I don't think I've ever had or heard of grants giving to the BLM. I'm sure I haven't heard it, nor have I ever seen anybody in the BLM actively go out and try to support get grants. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just seems to me that we were pretty successful with the Game and Fish doing that. And Forest Service has got 40-some pages that I read about that have gotten grants. Why don't we do that?
So, couple things. We actually have been successful and have worked with Arizona State Parks and Trails. We do actually have a grant currently with them for about $475,000. That is what's partially supported the travel management planning that Miley talked about. We've had numerous grants with them in the past for various trail projects and different aspects of that. We've had conversation with State Parks and Trails on having a grant once the TMPs are done for basically TMP implementations and route reclamation, things like that, which would go directly to funding for like some of the park rangers to actually go do that work, potentially force account, things like that. We haven't necessarily done a lot of grant or received a lot of grant work with Game and Fish until this point. And I think part of the challenge with that is that anybody that's worked with grants knows and understands that it takes a lot of time. It's a big workload. And so we kind of have taken this approach where, we're basically trying to tread water right now, and we're trying to get some resources injected into the program so that we can get some additional capacity so our folks can get the breathing space to be able to actually do those things. And so that's why we prioritized in the implementation of the RAC blueprint. Business plans is really our number one, not because it supports pillar number one, but because really bringing some additional resources into Arizona so we can get some additional capacity within the recreation program. And those gives us the opportunity to pursue additional opportunities that we just, quite frankly, our folks, well, the districts, folks that are doing this stuff on the day-to-day basis are just so busy that sitting down and spending a few days or, even a whole day to write a grant proposal is just not generally feasible at this point.
And Jerry, that's why we had the department that did that, because everybody else was too busy.
Yeah.
And they're actually too busy. But there's 3 people in that department and they generated over $1 million a year. So it was a well-invested group. I don't know if that fits in that, but I just brought it up because tomorrow we're going to talk about money and how to make these things work. And it amazes me that you are willing to build shooting facilities. And I sit over at the Game and Fish and I say, gosh, I wish we could get some support in building shooting facilities and there might be a discord. I know as a commissioner, if somebody came to me from the BLM and said, listen, we have this, we'd like to have your designs, we'd like to see you guys are professionals at this, and et cetera. And you know, and we could, would you help support building that? We as commissioners, it would have passed. But nobody asked. So, now I feel like I should shut up and I feel like I'm scolding you, but I don't mean to. I'm just saying, maybe there's some more money available out there that we just don't have the time to go get, because we don't have the personnel to go get it. Maybe we should revisit that.
Totally. Absolutely, always something that should be, we need to continue revisiting, right? There's always.
And I do remember sitting down with Game and Fish early on when I was in my other position, when we were first starting the whole, you know, design and just, you know, really plan for the rec shooting sites. And I remember having discussions like that, Bill, and I can't remember now what happened to that. That would have been turned over to the district back then for, you know, potential you know, grants or partnerships. I just don't remember, but it's definitely worth looking into. I know that we have gotten federal highway grants in the past, you know, different things like that. And, you know, we have this great experienced services program for experienced workers that we can bring people with that skill set that have retired and want to come back and do some of that work for us. So it might be something that, you know, if anybody has names of people who might want to do a little bit of something on the side, we could potentially fund something like that to look at grants. So something for us to think about, definitely.
Yeah, years ago, we had a writer editor in the comm shop that actually
Yeah.
did a lot of this kind of stuff, and it's just one of those things that's fallen by the wayside as the belt's been tightened over the years.
And Scott obviously has something to say there.
And Tracy talked a little bit about the Bureau's new philanthropic foundation earlier. I've been working with the foundation and their facilitation team right now on a proposal that should go hopefully final this summer for about $1.5 million over 3 years to support both recreation and restoration work on the San Pedro. So we are working, and that's that effort of that philanthropic, is to help us find other untapped sources. And one thing I was going to ask Tracy, but I think I'll actually ask the CEO of the foundation, is how are they working to leverage with other DOI foundation groups, just like we were talking about the restoration? Because as I was sitting in my hotel last night and the TV was up, Paramount Plus is apparently streaming one national park a day for the week. And that effort was, of course, funded by the National Park Foundation as an effort to generate awareness and money for national parks. So again, how can the different foundations potentially help each other leverage and learn from each other? So we haven't talked about that kind of stuff yet, because ours is brand new and still trying to figure their thing out. But I mean, wouldn't it have been great if they could have had like one BLM state or all of our NCAs highlighted during one of those first weeks?
And that circles back actually to your question, Jill. So the foundation is actually one of the biggest missing pieces when it comes to like trying to get money from NRA, because like generally BLM wouldn't be able to accept that directly, but now with the foundation, they can actually work with those third parties like that to get BLM those resources. So like Scott said, it's just really at its infancy and kind of starting up, you know, they're looking to make their first investments and get some big wins. And so hopefully, you know, we'll continue to see the benefits, or we'll start to see the benefits of that here.
Sure, every one of these, but every one of these takes somebody who wants to make it happen. Scott wanted to make that San Pedro happen, carry the water. You've got to get it, somebody in for writing grants. I almost rather see you go outside and have somebody write a grant, because you're paying somebody and they have to produce. Or because developing another person in another place is really difficult because of all the restrictions. And if you went outside and you got somebody to write grants for you, if it didn't work, you wouldn't have that person write grants for you. So, but I'm saying there may be some avenues there. And I didn't realize that until I read those Forest Service programs. Anyway, I'm done. I'm sorry. Please.
I've tucked that away, Bill. It's discussions that we've had in the past. And I've tucked it away too, or, what we could do there. We just, Ray and I often talk about, we just gotta do things differently. The way that we've done in the past it just isn't working, especially with the declining budgets and cost of doing business. So, thank you for that. And did want to just say really quick, the visit that the foundation did to San Pedro or to Sprinka, when was that? November, Scott?
Yes.
Them receiving, I think this would be the first round of actual funding from the foundation, and Sprinka being one of them. Gila District is direct result of them hosting the foundation, that board of directors, all the partners they brought in, and the work that Scott and his team have done in Gila. So we're really proud of that. We're small, but we're often, the first ones out of the gate on a lot of things. And so that's just one more perfect example of you're exactly right, where the hard work of our district and field.
Well, and in February, we had the RAC symposium. March. And so in March, the BLM had a Bureau-wide recreation symposium, which was training and a bunch of other stuff for a whole week here in Phoenix at the training center. And the CEO of the foundation actually came and did a presentation on, what their priorities are, and they had a whole brainstorm session on, what they should be looking at. And so one of their top 5 priorities is actually shooting sites, funding for shooting sites. That's also another thing here in Arizona that's on the radar. And we've been able to, take them out and actually kind of look at sites.
Yes, I wanted to ask if BLM here in Arizona is looking at implementing any fees for OHV recreation.
Like similar to like a permit to be able to use OHVs like Game and Fish has, or something like that.
Something like that, or for specific areas.
We're not looking at doing a permit like to be able to use an OHV on BLM lands. Do we have any OHV areas in the business plans, Smiley?
Hot Wheel Dunes, yeah. Yeah, it's managed by the Stafford Field Office. It's currently a fee area, and the primary use of that area is OHV. It has other amenities too. It's got a developed hot spring tub that you can sit in, and some developed campsites and other amenities. But that is an area that we're exploring, designating similar to what the Forest Service is doing, where there would be a permit so it'd be it's actually called a special recreation permit, but it's an individual special recreation permit, if that makes sense.
Is Phoenix gonna have any in their other plan?
Yeah. Right.
So that would apply to everyone visiting the site, is that correct?
Yes. Right.
Okay, thank you.
So it's so interesting about the grants aren't gonna, it's not a, have a one solution, it's just something to think about, that if it's very competitive and there's other groups that, is this appropriate, for example, to spend the time and energy to invest in it? Or is this maybe a grant that's better suited for local governments? It's just something I wanted to throw out there as consideration. Since I think some of the non-motorized funds with the Arizona State Parks grants may be quite competitive. But I'm not an expert, but I wanted to mention that as another thing for you all to think of, that, just to kind of put the other perspective on it.
Thanks. That's definitely a consideration. I know sometimes it can also be matching funds. Can be a challenge, but we recently made I think several connections with folks at different organizations that have expressed interest in being able to help beyond Arizona with that specifically. So
Yeah, is this on? No, it's not.
right there.
There it is. Without getting too much into the weeds, but Bill, your point, and I think that when that foundation for the American Public Lands gets up and running, I think there's a lot more that can be done there. You just take a look at what the national park has done. I've been involved with the Grand Canyon Conservancy for a really long time. They even have retail shops where a portion of the proceeds, of course, go right back to Grand Canyon National Park. They also have, for all of their fees, you can donate $1 to Grand Canyon National Park. Something like that with even our fee structure as we go forward is something to take a look at. The donation back to BLM. And by the way, it's been very profitable for them. So I think your point is we need to look at other revenue sources and hopefully with the Foundation for American Public Lands, when that gets off the ground, hopefully they'll be able to do that and really be a partner with the BLM for providing other revenue sources. And as of course, a member of local government, county government, yeah, we don't want you to compete with our grants. No, usually these grants are set forth in such a manner that they probably wouldn't be competitive, but one never knows. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, totally agree. And that's the donations aspect of that is definitely something that we're tracking. We're doing somewhat already through recreation.gov. They have where you can actually have donation buttons for certain sites that are on there. We're working with folks in headquarters on how we can do that, like digital donations similar to that via on site. So there's been some security challenges that we're kind of working through them with as far as making sure that they can't get looped into like a type of scam or something like that, but the funds actually get to where they're supposed to go, the site, not somewhere that's not BLM. But that's, those are challenges that we're working through with the.
You don't need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's been invented. It's just a matter of just kind of plugging into what other people that are doing that are being successful and modeling after that.
I didn't think I had very much. Y'all have great questions.
Is the foundation looking for industry funding too also? Is it possible that the foundation could go out and actually address to the industry like automotive industry or OHV industry or firearms industry to get their support?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the foundation, but from what I've heard in a couple different conversations and presentations, I think the short answer is yes. They'd love to go find their Subaru or whatever to help support BLM's mission. Absolutely. Paul?
Any other questions? Or you might just stand up there, you've been up there all day.
I know, right? As long as y'all didn't bring rotten vegetables.
Okay, who do we have left? Mark?
We got Mark.
Just me.
I recommend I was thinking, we can push through or we can have a short break. It's up to you. We had a short break scheduled originally.
Okay, well, he is.
Okay,
the
looks
last-
like we have a vote to push through, but I'll leave that up to Bill.
Wait a minute. Well, it's not, I would ask you, if you're the last presenter, which I believe you are, then we could excuse ourselves. Which is a couple hours long.
It's not a couple hours long.
Good, so if it's okay with all of you, let's go ahead and do this. Thank you very much. Want to go ahead and sit down?
Yes. Right next to your chair.
I haven't turned that one on.
Can you hear me now? All right. You saw our major presentation earlier this morning, which is a large chunk of what we're doing here in the Division of Lands, Minerals, Energy, and Cadastral Survey. But that's not all we do. I mean, obviously, we're trying to ramp up the renewable energy side, but we still have what we would call our day-to-day business that we have to get through and get a lot of the stuff done. Busy throughout the state. a couple projects that I'm kind of excited about, that's kind of coming to fruition. And some of the inception, I guess, a little bit. Coke Ovens, which is a historical site about 12 miles northeast of Florence. That's an LWCF project, which is Land, Water and Conservation Fund. Not familiar with that. That's funds generated by the oil and offshore oil and gas, where we can acquire properties or projects to help unlock BLM's land. So I mean, it just expands our opportunities to use our resource that we love so much. But we're looking at hopefully closing that sometime this summer. That's a super exciting project. Another one is Telegraph Pass, which is just east of Yuma, just north of I-8. We have a private land that pretty much locks out a whole bunch of land that they can do there. It's very open right now, but if it's ever sold, it could sever some access to land. So we submitted a proposal for that. So hopefully we'll get positive news on that and we can move forward on that. We do have other projects, a lot of rights of way, lots of communication sites going out. Like I said, the renewable energy is a big one. Another big push that we're working on right now is going to be broadband. There's a Mobile Act now, which is coming. We don't have a ton of projects yet in Arizona, but I know some of our sister states do. So we're envisioning kind of a heavy workload for that coming through. But again, renewable energy is obviously a focus, but we've got a ton of stuff going on throughout the state and other programs within the division. So instead of taking up all the time telling you what's going on, is there any questions, anything for me? Bill, anything that is on your mind?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna bring it up with you.
All right.
Where I'm parked.
Oh.
Now, you did make a good presentation. I think a lot of people don't understand. I don't know if Steve's still on the line, but BLM does a whole lot of mining industry and all this aggregates that you see going in and all that concrete that's being poured on places. So much of that comes from BLM, and there's more and more pressure. And that means more and more pressure on this group because this state is growing by leaps and bounds. And it's difficult to find building materials around Phoenix like it used to not be difficult. Now it is becoming difficult. And that is because we're running out of private land and going on federal land. And use around all the big cities.
It is a big part. There is a lot of saleable minerals that we have here that we
People
generate a
just don't-
lot.
You see a cement truck going down there, don't think anything about it. That rock probably came. BLM pit, someplace that had to be approved. And signed. So, yes, your people do a lot that we don't.
And that's also a good point here I'd like to bring up, because we talked a little bit about financing and how we get funds and do different things. One of the questions that I get is, we generate a lot of revenue from rights away and different things. A lot of that money doesn't come to Arizona, it goes to the national treasury. So we get appropriated funds to manage it, but of all the money we generate, and it's $15 to $20 million a year, a lot of that does not come to the state. That's why we have to go around and find different ways to be creative to get the work done that we do. So. There.
Any other questions?
I think it's worth it to say that we're second in the Bureau for a number of mining claims. Nevada's first and Arizona's second. So again, small state. And we do all of that work every year.
A lot of 60,000 mining claims that we do every year. Generates about, it's almost $7 million of revenue just in maintenance fees.
Process.
Yeah.
And the sad thing about it, if you hit on it, it doesn't stay here.
Doesn't stay.
No.
It goes back in that black hole that's.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no other questions, I'd like to go ahead and wrap it up unless anybody has anything else they want to bring up. Jerry, you want to get up there again?
I was gonna say, I don't know if you want to say anything towards the plan for tomorrow. You know, if you want to say anything towards tomorrow.
I was going to, but did you have something you? Well, I'd be really honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. One or two things. One of them will have a presentation from the Forest Service, and if they're still here, Uh, we're your friends, okay? We're not your enemy. We're put in a position to respond to what you're trying to do with the idea that maybe we might have a different viewpoint because I'm a cattle rancher as opposed to somebody else. And so we hope those make sense to you. But please don't consider us as, oh my God, I don't want to go up there. I don't know if any of you worked with Francisco, but I felt like we were leading him off the plank every time he came into this room. And he actually ended up being a good friend of ours but we learned together. And that's the message I want to leave with you is we'll learn together. I'm not familiar with all of you, but I'm going to get to by the time 4:30 comes around tomorrow. And so our job is really to sit back and help you sell this with the public. We may have a difference in agreement on how to do it, but that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. So just please don't go home tonight and say, oh, what's going to happen what's break going to do to me tomorrow? Okay, that won't happen, I don't think. The rest of us, and help me out on this, Doris, I spent a long time. Basically, we need to listen and hear and ask questions. Our vote, we can vote, yes, we have enough information that we think this should go past. And if we get a majority, then it passes. Or we can say, hey, we'd like to have a vote before we do a yes or no, and whether or not we need more information before we go forward and give a yes or no. That's going to come from you all. That's not my job. My job is if you feel uncomfortable with something, you bring that up, let us know, and then we'll take a vote on it and see what goes on. I've got two neat people that are going to help me out on this, and that's JC. Their job not to go get those answers. Their job is to figure out, okay, how do I get those answers? And they're not going to drive to Graham County. Unfortunately, Paul, they're going to call you up and say, okay, help us out with this thing. So if we go into some of that, and I think we will, none of us are off the hook. We just have to have somebody in charge to make sure that we gather that information and don't come back a few months later, be in the same situation. But we're not, and I also might want to tell you that ours is a recommendation. They can go ahead and do what they'd like to do with or without our recommendation. In the past, it has always worked out that we may have issues, but we come up with a better plan. And then we vote on it, and they usually go along with what we say. In fact, I cannot ever remember us giving a recommendation and them doing something differently, but they have every right to do that. So don't let your feelings get hurt if after we sit back and tell them these are our thoughts, if they do something else, because they've got another set of bosses to listen to too. So anyway, that's kind of how the groundwork is tomorrow. And the only thing, we have public commenting period. If you had a chance to look over some of those things, we're going to have a limit of 35 seconds a person, or there'll be two people there and we won't know what to do. But and the last thing I need to mention to you, and I think you all know this, it's not necessary to answer public. In fact, I would say from my standpoint, I will not do that because I want to hear, but I don't want to get into a verbal argument with somebody that I don't know the whole thing with. So I discourage you not to get into a large discussion on any of those, but just sit back and listen. And with that, I can tell you're going to say something, so I'm going to shut up and then I adjourn.
I just want to remind folks, again, like on Bill's recommendation, feel free to have the questions and the comments for the Forest Service when they're up here presenting. We're going to probably have where Bill was talking about is in the public comment period. We do have two scheduled for tomorrow. One is scheduled during the RAC presentation period, so that the public can comment with regards to the RAC presentations that are being presented that day. The afternoon one will be an open general one for them to comment on any type of BLM business that may have been conducted, or if they want to provide their 2 cents. We want to sit and be responsive and listen. The other thing I wanted to mention is quorum. We're on the verge of not having one tomorrow. I need to make sure everyone is here. As much as possible. I've received notification from a couple of folks that they might be able to come in the mornings. As long as possible, that'd be great. Just so we can conduct business. If we do not have a quorum, we have to move business to another meeting. And that would be in the next cycle of meetings that we'd be announcing here later. So instead of scheduling just 2 meetings for the end of the year, we'd have to schedule potentially 3 or 4, just to provide the Forest Service with the recommendations that they're looking for on these business plans that we have. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, well, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a clarification and since I'm new here. And when we talk about recreation fees, and we're talking with the Forest Service, are we looking for some kind of continuity between the fee structure between BLM access and BLM land, Forest Service lands, or does it matter? Any thoughts?
That's a good question, and haven't kicked around here for a long time. I never even thought about it, because that's really the basics of why we're here. These are requests for guidance by the Forest Service for the Forest Service. I have not been aware of any connection with BLM at all. These are theirs. We have some, the BLM, they're not being presented at this particular time. But to answer your question, these are fee increases that they're asking for. Now, that's the devil's in the frying pan. A fee increase is fine, but we're going to eliminate parking here and all that. Well, then that gets into, well, why are you going to raise the fees and eliminate parking? I don't know that that's the case. I'm just using an example, but we would ask that question, and maybe they say, well, we need to go back and review that, because you got a good point there, and maybe we can add parking places if we have these fees. That's the discussion that takes place. You may not. We have never turned down any fee requests. We have asked for clarification on a lot of them. I don't want to go into a lot of time, but when we start doing stuff in the areas of Sedona and Flagstaff and Tucson and Mount Lemmon, become very contentious, and then sometimes they get into good discussions. We're not obligated to give them a yes or no. We are obligated to listen to them, and well, I guess we are obligated to give them a yes or no, I beg your pardon. But we don't have to do it immediately. We have every right to sit back and say, we want to know by closing these places or closing these roads or adding these fees, where will people go? Is there any place else for them to go who don't have $100 a night to that last year was free? Those are questions that we can ask, and as we feel comfortable with them. Somebody is going to ask for a vote. I might ask for a vote, and based on the conversation that's going on, I might say, do we want to vote on this, or would we prefer to have a vote on whether or not we want to get these questions answered first? And I would ask you all for a vote on that, and if you say we're satisfied, the majority says that, then we would give our vote on it.
Can I say something, Bill? We haven't said that we're gonna have consistent fees. I think you asked that with the Forest Service, but we have looked at, for BLM at least, since we haven't done this in a really long time. We've looked at their fees. I'm sure Jerry and Miley have, done, just not only with our federal partners, but other providers that have sites that provide the same types of amenities. And that's what I said early today. We're really looking forward from the BLM side. You're gonna see a lot of people in the room and on online tomorrow, dialing in to hear the questions that you ask of Forest Service and hear their presentations, just so we can learn from that. And maybe, before we finalize ours, get as much information, like I said, as we can from you all. So we have done benchmarking for our fees, and that certainly went into you know, what we're going to be proposing. However, each site's different. The amenities they provide is different. So I think it's all part of the big picture, but not any effort to say because you charge this, we're going to charge this. But we have looked at what they charge for similar type sites.
Cause I would think that would be important.
Yeah.
You know, it's all public land, and if there's similar type of amenities and similar type of services, and you know, it would
Absolutely.
seem to me that there should be a certain, I mean, it doesn't have to be identical, but of certain continuity.
Yeah. Yeah. If they're charging $5 and we're charging 50,
That's
definitely there's something. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We're not charging.
Okay, thank you for your comment. As I said, we'll all have a better understanding about 7:30 tomorrow night when we still haven't gotten out of here and we're trying to figure this out. That'll threaten to keep you awake all night. But anyway, I do appreciate everybody's attendance. If you get in an accident, have the ambulance bring you here.
Yeah.
So you sign in and then go ahead, take care of it.
We do have a virtual option.
Turn on the TV.
The ambulance.
From the ambulance and or yes, the
I thank you again and good night. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves and we'll see you in the morning.